Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, are the Timberwolves really all in for this season? Do they have to win? Is it championship or bust? ESPN seems to think it's championship or bust. I'll explain why Tim Connelly is smarter than that. There's a lot more to this season. There's a lot more to the next few years than they must win this year for all the reasons laid out by ESPN. It's all upcoming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I am the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. Hopefully you're having a fantastic week so far. Today on the show, I want to talk about a couple of different things that ESPN's put out there over the last couple of weeks. One of them being they're all in tiers. What's every team in the NBA all in on this season? The Timberwolves are in the most all-in of the all-in tiers. And ESPN seems to think it's championship or bust. And then there was the Kendrick Perkins comment from, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago now where he talked about if the Wolves don't win this year, Ant may request a trade. We'll talk about that. They're linked. My rebuttal to both of these things is related. And actually, I've got a few points to make here. Getting on my soapbox a little bit about just how good Tim Connelly is at his job and why I think both of these takes from ESPN are a bit erroneous. So that's what we're going to do today on the show. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So the article in question, we're going to start there. This was something that was posted on, I believe, Monday of this week. And yes, it was posted on Monday. And the title of the article, this is a Tim Bontemps, Kevin Pelton article. And Bontemps, obviously, more of a traditional reporter type. Kevin Pelton, much more analytical, right? The former front office analytics guy who does a really good job overall. The name of this article is NBA All-In Tiers, what all 30 teams are chasing in 2025-26. And this article sets out to say basically what's each team trying to do this year. Like what is the team's goal this year? What are they all in on trying to do? So there's 8 tiers. 1 is all in on winning a championship before the window closes. We'll talk about that. 2 is all in on an extended championship window. There are 5 teams in that tier. The Wolves are not. I would have put them in that tier. The next one has 5 teams. That's all in on building with young cores, which are largely not very good teams, kind of borderline playoff teams. Then you got all in on 2 timelines, lots of aging teams. I mean, you could guess who those teams are, right? Obviously the LA teams and Miami and Philly and Golden State. And then all in on a gap year, which the injuries due to Tatum and Halliburton, obviously Celtics and Pacers. And then all in on draft position. There's 4 teams there. And then 4 teams for all in on nothing because nobody knows what the Bulls, Pelicans, Kings, and Raptors are doing. And I feel like that same statement could have made it this time last year or even the year before. I know the Kings and Pelicans had a couple good years in there, but did they really? So all that to say, there's 8 tiers. Minnesota is in tier 1, along with only 2 other teams in the tier that's called all in on winning a championship before the window closes. Now, Denver and Milwaukee absolutely belong here. Denver kind of has to be because they have the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic. They've already won a championship, obviously. And Jokic may sign an extension next summer. He said pretty early on he was not going to sign that extension this summer. And Jokic hasn't exactly made noise about leaving. There's at least been a little bit of smoke there. And of course, not signing the extension doesn't help that. But of course, there's no reason for him to sign it this summer. He could just sign it next summer. And then obviously the Bucks are the obvious one with Giannis and what they're trying to do around him. Dame the last couple of years, and then now Miles Turner. And then Minnesota, there's the least words said about Minnesota in this tier. I'll just read what it says. It says Minnesota, meanwhile, is one of the trickier teams to classify. Franchise player Anthony Edwards will spend another season on our top 25 players under 25 list, which doesn't exactly scream win now. But the Wolves have traded most of their draft capital to keep this team together, are butting up against the salary cap second apron, and must figure out eventual replacements for both Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert, whose arrivals have helped lift Minnesota to back-to-back appearances in the Western Conference Finals. Okay. So where do I want to start here? There's a lot of places we can go. I think the Ant point is the most obvious one. I'm going to save that one. Actually, no, let's start there. I think we got to start with the Anthony Edwards piece. But then I want to talk about all the optionality that Tim Connelly has built into this thing. So the reason why I think this is so absurd is Anthony Edwards is not old, right? Like the Timberwolves' best player, like Giannis is a lot older than Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards, in fact, his birthday was yesterday. Ant turned 24 yesterday. That's not the same thing as Giannis. It's like, I think that in and of itself is because, and we'll talk about the Perkins piece later. So we'll circle back to Anthony Edwards towards the end, the Kendrick Perkins comment on ESPN. There isn't smoke around Anthony Edwards wanting to leave. In fact, to this point, it's been exactly the opposite. He's 6 years younger than Giannis. I believe Jokic is roughly that same age. Yeah, right. Jokic is 30. He's 6 years younger than both Jokic and Giannis. So what reason would there be to put the Timberwolves in the same tier of all-in winning this year with Jokic and Giannis, who are both 6 years older and have both won a championship, other than maybe he'll want to leave in a couple years? Like, it makes no sense at all. The Wolves are not, they're butting up against the second apron, but they've already shown the ability to be pretty creative. I mean, we're still more than 11 months or not even 11 months removed from the Cat trade. And nobody thought that was necessarily going to play out the way it did. And they gave themselves more optionality. They could have gotten out of the expensive borderline all-star big men business this summer by getting off of Julius Randle and or getting off of Naz Reid, and they didn't. But the point is they created themselves that window, which, yes, we'll talk more about, more generally about the different windows and off-ramps, if you will, that Tim Connelly has created. But the Timberwolves have the best player. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The Timberwolves have the youngest player of the three of these teams looking at their best player. Now, of course, Jokic and Giannis still are better players than, I think they're both top 5 players. I think Ant is in the 5 to 7 range in terms of best player in the league. But Ant is 6 years younger, and he's already signed this big extension. There's no obvious reason to assume he's going anywhere. And if you think Julius Randle is the second best player on the team, which I think is a pretty fair argument, Julius is still in his prime, and he's still got 2 years and then a player option on his deal. So, there's nothing massive changing about this roster in the next year. Nothing massive changed this offseason. I guess Mike Conley, this is very likely his last year. So that would be the one thing. But unless you think that, and I should say the other factor here is clearly the Wolves have been to consecutive conference finals. And normally, nobody wants to be the Buffalo Bills of the early 90s. If you don't know that reference, look it up. Well, I'll just explain it to you. They went to 4 straight Super Bowls and lost, right? Nobody wants to, and this is obviously a little different because the Wolves got to the conference finals. Nobody wants to get to the conference finals, year after year and not make it. But that doesn't mean that shouldn't necessarily mean, and we'll talk about this in light of Perkins' comments in the final segment today, that doesn't mean that because they went to the conference finals twice and because they're butting up against the second apron and their third best player and seventh best player, whatever, and Mike Conley, eighth best player, are old. That doesn't mean that it's like championship or bust this year. That feels like an unnecessary leap to make. I want to talk more about Tim Connelly's off-ramps, the optionality, the flexibility, however you want to say it, that Tim Connelly has built into this Timberwolves roster and why that makes me kind of laugh at this ESPN bit. We'll do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's a game day and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money that you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. And Gametime makes it all possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. They've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. I know that the Twins just did this crazy historical sell-off at the trade deadline, but look, there's some young, exciting players. Luke Keeshaw's back. He missed, 3+, almost 4 months, 3.5 months with the broken arm, and he's awesome. His first big league home run the other night, last night, actually. They're going to be fun to watch. Go check out a game, right? Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB as well. That makes it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. The Twins are back in town coming up here very soon. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay. So defending the Timberwolves roster building process, and also the absurd idea of the Timberwolves needing to be all in now. The Ant piece, I think, is the most obvious one, which we already talked about. Like the youngest, best player on these three teams. And if you want to look at the teams that are in that next tier of the extended championship window, like the Cavs have young talent with obviously with Evan Mobley, and of course they extended Donovan Mitchell. He's obviously older than Ant, but he's not super old. The Rockets make sense, I guess, although the Durant thing, that one's a little bit weird to me because I understand Şengün is a star. Amen Thompson is close to being a star, but let's not put the cart before the horse. I think the midseason Amen Thompson freak out was a bit much, and he could end up being great. I think there's really a chance, but let's not pretend like Şengün and Thompson and adding Kevin Durant suddenly extends their championship window. I just think that's strange. The Knicks, the Thunder, the Magic. I feel like the Magic need to win something before that's what we're saying that they're up to. I feel like they should be more in the building around young cores, not in the extending a championship window. Would anyone say right now with a straight face that the Magic have an open championship window? I know they were fantastic defensively and Desmond Bane is a great addition, but man, it just feels like we're taking some leaps here. I think the Wolves should be in that tier. Tim Connelly has very intentionally built himself multiple different lanes he could take. And I said this at the time of the Gobert trade or shortly after the Gobert trade and then after the Naz Reid extension. Remember, just a couple of years ago, we didn't know if Naz Reid would get extended by the Timberwolves. I was worried about them paying too much in terms of average annual value. And it ended up being a really reasonable deal, and it was tradable. And guess what? That's where we are again with both him and Julius Randle. The most likely scenario is the Timberwolves play out this year with no major moves. Gobert is still on the team. Randle's still on the team. Naz is still on the team when you get to next year. That's the most likely scenario. But if Tim Connelly wants, if something crazy happens, if they play terribly or whatever, you can't tell me you wouldn't be able to trade Naz Reid at 4 years and average value of $23.5 million over the 4 years. Even Julius Randle, obviously a higher number, but it's only a 2-year deal with a player option for the third year. So he's getting paid under $31 million this year, $33-ish million the following year, and then the player options for just under $36 million. That's a tradable deal too. And even Rudy Gobert, we saw it this offseason. Phoenix was interested in a trade for Rudy Gobert. I know everybody had fun at the expense of the Wolves when they traded for Rudy Gobert, but now they've been to 2 conference finals, and they could have traded Rudy Gobert in a deal for Kevin Durant if they wanted to. But they didn't want to do it because Durant wasn't going to sign an extension, so they chose not to. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago when we discussed that rumor in more depth. Gobert's the ultimate floor raiser. Teams know that. So if there's a team that comes, say things go haywire, God forbid this happens, but Ant gets hurt or something crazy happens early in the year, they just play terribly, and they're like, all right, we need to pivot again. You can't tell me there's not a couple teams that would be like, yeah, we'll take Rudy. We want to raise our floor. We'll let you pivot. and maybe Tim Connelly and Chris Finch say, all right, we'll trade Rudy. We'll start playing smaller. Jean Beringer is maybe our center of the future in a couple of years. He's out there, we're just playing this ultra long athletic front court and we'll pivot from Rudy Gobert and get some assets back, recoup some of the assets when we traded for him in the first place. That's a legit pivot. Julius Randle, you could pivot there. And again, like Randle's only got 2 years in a player option. Gobert's only got 2 years in a player option. And say they both opt in 3 years from now. After that season, Ant would still have 1 more year with this team. So if they really wanted to completely, like at that point, you could do anything, right? You could extend Ant, like he'll be extension eligible after this next year. So maybe they even extend him before that. There's so many things that could happen between now and then. And the actual core of this team that's under contract for a longer period of time is Ant, Jaden McDaniels, and Naz Reid. Those dudes are all under contract through 2029. Through 2029. And Jaden's, 25? Naz is 26. Ant's 24. So none of those guys are going to be above 30 when their contracts are up. That's the actual core of this team. And that you go another layer, and then you look at the young talent. And this is obvious. This is where you get into the territory that I was kind of even more undeveloped than obviously the Rockets, who were, this 2 seed or whatever last year, but not or whatever, they were the 2 seed. So I'm not saying it's apples to apples, but what I'm saying now is, like, we know what Naz and Jaden are, and can still have improvement. We know obviously what Ant is and can still improve. We don't yet know about Rob Dillingham. We don't know about John Beringer. We don't know about TJ Shannon, Jalen Clark to a lesser extent, but that's kind of the next wave. And if Rob Dillingham can replace Mike Conley, then you do have his replacement. He was a number 8 pick just over a year ago. Beringer was a nearly a lottery pick this year and is a teenager still. Obviously Shannon Clark, older, but inexperienced at the NBA level. And then also Jaden and Naz, who are young veterans, if you will. There's another wave of talent on this roster, and the Timberwolves have kind of backfilled that with depth. We talked about Johnny Juzang on yesterday's show. He's obviously deep bench, but like Tristan Newton is another example, 2-way guy who's like a young veteran, if you will, at this point. I guess he's much younger, but they're investing in these kind of older prospects to provide depth because they have a higher floor and can play a role. Yes, that's part of the win now mentality. But on top of that, you have this other wave, right? The Dillingham, the Beringer, to a much lesser extent, because who knows, Rocco Zakarsky, Leonard Miller. So not only has Tim Connelly given himself these off-ramps, he's given himself options too. Like the off-ramp of trading Cat last year, that was, let's get out of the Cat business. Let's not worry about the second apron. Let's take a 2-for-1. And again, raise the floor of it as a team. I know that they won 7 less games last year than the year before with Cat, but in general, they made the team deeper. No one would argue that they didn't by trading Cat out. Randle's not quite as good as Karl-Anthony Towns, but Dante DiVincenzo's a borderline top 100 player, as we talked about the other day on the show. Like, that made the team, the roster overall better. And now Nikhil's out, but you hope TJ Shannon can more than backfill that. And if you're only turning over a couple of rotation pieces on a conference finals team year after year, I don't understand why this has to be a win now situation. Like, say this year goes horribly and they don't trade anybody. Does it get a little sticky with the second apron next year? Sure. But remember, they're already relying on affordable guys like TJ Shannon, Rob Dillingham, relatively affordable Jalen Clark. Like, these guys are already part of the fringes of the rotation. And everybody else is under contract. Like, nobody's, other than Mike Conley, nobody's a free agent after this year. So there isn't a panic. Like, I don't get it. And we'll talk about Perkins' comments next that he made on ESPN, but I just think it's a really strange thing to be like, all right, they got to win this year. They got to win this year. They just have to, because Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley are old. I don't know. I don't buy that. I really don't. And obviously replacing Rudy Gobert, like, again, a floor raiser, if Gobert, say they do trade him, or in a couple of years when he is less effective, yeah, I mean, they're going to need to change how they play. But they already did that once under Chris Finch. And, that's obviously going to be significant. But it's not apples to that. You're not going to replace him with another Rudy Gobert-esque player. You're very likely just going to shift the way, and that's the idea with Beringer is look, we'll just play this different style. And Beringer is going to learn under Rudy Gobert and obviously hopefully be as impactful defensively, which would be incredible, but a bit of a different style defender than Rudy Gobert. And very interested to see how that plays out over the next couple of years. But that's obviously part of the plan here for the Timberwolves. All right. I want to talk about the Ant stuff, the Kendrick Perkins ridiculous comments from a couple of weeks ago. It's related to what we talked about here, the first two segments. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on, and that is why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. OpenPhone lets me manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. And their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so that you never miss a customer. OpenPhone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OpenPhone, OpenPhone.com/LockedOnNBA. If you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone. No missed calls, no missed customers. Okay. So our guy, Kendrick Perkins, not our guy at all. I don't know why I said that. Kendrick Perkins said some stuff on ESPN a couple of weeks ago about how Anthony Edwards isn't making the top of the top, I think, or something like that is how he said it. He referenced, I think, Bradley Beal's contract. He makes 50-something million. It has to do with his service time is the phrase that you didn't use in baseball, right? He's been in the league longer, so you can sign for a larger percentage of the cap. So as I talked about earlier, Anthony Edwards can sign an extension as early as next summer. Remember, his contract goes through 28, 29. He could sign an extension next summer, but he does not have to, just like we talked about with Nikola Jokic. And next summer, he could basically do what Bradley Beal did and sign 35% of the cap. That's how the NBA is structured now. Beal's on his third contract. The third contract is worth that much money. Like, you're able to sign for that percentage of the cap. And, I mean, depending on how much the cap goes up, that's going to be $1 kajillion for Anthony Edwards. Not actually, but you know what I mean? Like, just a ton of money. But the way that Kendrick Perkins talked about it, there's two things. One, it shows he doesn't understand how the salary cap works. And like, I'm not a salary cap expert either, but just do a little bit of research, which is, what I did. Not hard. Do your research, Perk. Which is a crazy thing to say because he's not going to do that. And I know he loves Ant and everything, but come on. Like, the way NBA contracts work, it's all percentages of the cap. I'm sure he doesn't understand the second apron, like all that stuff. It's not like baseball where you just say, this guy's worth this, so we're going to pay him this much. It's not that way. And there's obviously pros and cons to that. I'm not arguing against it at all, necessarily. But just because somebody makes more money than Ant doesn't mean Anthony Edwards can make more money anywhere else. The Timberwolves have paid him as much as they can pay him. Like, Ant's made as much money as he can make. Like, there's a limit to what you can do here. And then the second piece is, by saying it, you're insinuating that he wants to leave, which I think even Bill Simmons said this on his podcast. I think he had on Nate Tice, who, of course, is the son of former Vikings coach Mike Tice, and a Timberwolves fan, football analyst for The Ringer, but also a Timberwolves fan. And they kind of, Simmons, actually, to his credit, was kind of complaining about like this chatter about, well, Ant want to leave. Like, let's not do this, right? And I say this obviously as somebody who covers the Timberwolves, but I agree. Like, let's not do this. Why do we have to do this thing? And they've gone to the conference finals 2 straight years. It'd be one thing if they lost in the first round and Ant was scoring 40 a game and they were still losing in the first round. I mean, Ant wasn't very good in the conference finals either of the last 2 years. Like, he was one of the reasons, not the reason, one of the reasons that they lost in 5 games to Dallas 2 years ago and lost this year, or 1 year ago, lost this year to OKC in 5 games. Ant was part of the problem. It's not like he dragged them there and then lost despite a heroic effort. That's not what happened here. And again, who really cares about that piece? They still got to consecutive conference finals, and he's made as much money as he could possibly make. Why would he want to leave now? It just doesn't make any sense. And I get it. They have to fill hours of TV, and Perkins says the things that Perkins says, but I just thought that was kind of bonkers. And it's related to this whole all-in thing. And I'm not suggesting necessarily, although I'm not suggesting, it feels like a very in cahoots sort of ESPN situation. Like, and I get the sentiment of I think it's more subconscious than anything else. Like, oh, the Timberwolves went to consecutive conference finals. They better break through this year. Like, these things aren't always linear. And I'm not trying to say that the Wolves shouldn't have their sights set on a championship, because they should. But this window is an open window that will remain for several years, should remain for several years, because of Anthony Edwards. So I think it's if we really think Ant's not on the team in like 3 years, then fine. But why do we think that? It's not money, and they've been winning. And they should be able to continue winning for all the reasons we talked about in the first 2 segments of today's show. The optionality, the flexibility, the multiple windows that Tim Connelly has created for himself and for the Timberwolves. And they've cashed into the tune of consecutive conference finals appearances, and will be absolutely in the mix this year as well. So I think the whole thing is just weird, and perhaps, unfortunately, unsurprising as well. All right. That's all I got for today. Today, it's Wednesday's show today. We will not have a show on Thursday. I will have a show Friday. I think I'm going to talk more top 100 players, because we got some clarification on how we're ranking players. Turns out players were due this Friday. I went in, made some revisions. We'll talk about that on Friday's show, and then hopefully we'll get the full Locked On top 100 NBA players list soon. Also going to be recording with Josh Lloyd of Locked On Fantasy Basketball for his show, and we'll look and so we'll have some comments, I think, based on that conversation that we'll talk about here, and then also looking to line up some guests for next week as well. A reminder that we are right now 3 to 4 shows a week throughout the month of August. So make sure to keep checking back. And for the most part, we'll be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with probably an extra show on either Tuesday and Thursday most weeks. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that for your second listen, you can go check out the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason over there. Our guys Doug, Matt, and Hayes do a fantastic job of keeping you abreast of all the offseason action in the NBA and allow you, or help you, be the most informed NBA fan possible. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, this very Locked On Wolves podcast is also part of that very same Locked On Podcast Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast. We'll catch you next time.